July is officially over, and in today's video we're going to be doing my wrap-up of my July reads as well as all of my Summerween type of projects that I made. Hello, Sonnet here. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're having a fantastic summer. It is officially August and Halloween is getting closer. I hope everyone is excited, or if you're not, I hope you're still enjoying your summer. I just hope you're having a good time. But as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and go through all of the books that I read in July as well as all of the projects that I made. We're going to start with the books first, so if you're not interested in what I read in July, you can go ahead and skip to this number here to see all of the projects that I made. But let's go ahead and dive into the books. We're going to go ahead and list these in order of my least favorite to my favorite book that I read in July. So I read 12/13 books in July. We're going to go ahead and get into why that number is different in a moment, but let's start with my least favorite book that I read this month, and that is Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. This is essentially a horror comedy that takes place in a IKEA type of furniture store. I had really high expectations for this one. I hear good things about Grady Hendrix. Essentially, the reason why I didn't like this book so much is I feel like it was a really grand idea with what could be a totally unique story that just ended up being very generic and dull. I did give this book 2.75 stars. I didn't hate it. It's described as a horror comedy. I did not get scared whatsoever, which is great. I didn't want to. It didn't give me nightmares, so that's a good thing. But I didn't find it very funny either. None of the humor kind of hit with me. I didn't care about any of these characters whatsoever. And although the setting of the IKEA type of furniture store is really interesting, I feel like so much more could have been done with it. At the end of the day, I'm not mad that I read it, but then once I'm done with this video, it's probably not going to cross my mind again. Next up on my list is Preacher by Garth Ennis with Steve Dillon and Joe R. Lansdale. So this is a graphic novel, volume 1 of the Preacher series. Now I have seen Preacher the show, so I kind of knew what to expect, but oh boy, I didn't know what to expect at the same time. I gave this one 3 stars. I liked it. However, you guys know that I am very sensitive to violence and gore and scary things and disturbing things, and well, Preacher is all of those and more. If you're interested in picking up the graphic novel Preacher, just know that there is every imaginable trigger warning in it possible, like every single one. It is very dark, it is very graphic, the language is abhorrent, it is just a lot. Essentially, this story is about Jesse Custer. He's a small town preacher. He merges with a being called Genesis, and then all craziness breaks loose. And that's all I have to say about Preacher. Next up is not a horror, spooky, Halloween themed book. I needed a kind of a break in there, and I have been wanting to read this one, so I picked up A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. Last month I did read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and I loved it. I believe I gave that one 4 stars. And at the end of reading this book, I read the Kindle Unlimited version. I immediately then got the audiobook and listened to it. So that's why we have our 12/13 book count, because essentially I read this one twice. This book is super short. It's 124 pages, and it's essentially about Monk, a tea monk, and the splendid speckled mosscap, who is a robot. They go on a little tiny adventure. Again, it's a very short book. And although this book was 124 pages, it took me forever to read this one. For whatever reason, I would get like 3 or 4 pages in, and then I would want to go to sleep. Maybe I was just sleep deprived in July, but whatever reason, I could not get through this book. It was 124 pages, and it took me over a week to finish it. And when I was done reading it, I didn't love it. I rated it 3 stars, but the reviews on Goodreads are so much higher than that. This book gets an average of 4.29 stars on Goodreads. So I was thinking to myself, what's wrong with me? What did I miss? Why did I not love this one? Especially because I loved A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and this one reminded me a lot of In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, which I rated 5 stars. After I read it, I immediately started listening to the audiobook because I thought there was something I must have missed, and at the end of the audiobook, my rating went from a 3 up to 3.5. I like this one. I think it is very sweet. I love Mosscap. Perhaps it was the length. I know there's a second book. I can't guarantee I'm gonna get to that one. I do like little slice of life type of content when it comes to movies and books and things, but this one just wasn't it for me. Again, I did like it. It just was very meh. Next up, we have Lace and Lies by Nancy Warren. This is book number 7 in the Vampire Knitting Club series. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is probably one of my least favorite books in the series. I thought it was fine. I thought it was fun. It had me guessing. This is actually one of the few that I didn't solve the mystery before the end, but I feel like this story was just kind of meh again. The story was kind of forgettable, and I do like all the characters still, and I will continue this series. There's not much more to say. 3.5 stars. It was fine. Next up, we have Small Spaces by Katherine Arden. This is a middle grade book about an 11-year-old named Ollie, and she is dealing with grief big time in this book. And essentially she comes across a woman who is trying to throw a book out into the river, but Ollie loves books, saves the book, goes home, starts reading it, and then she learns the tale of 2 brothers and a woman that they loved, and then a smiling man, and then a farm is involved, and there's scarecrows, and it's a creepy time. I really enjoyed this story. Again, it was a 3.75 for me. I love the way grief was explored in this novel, especially with such a young character. I think that is so important for young people to be able to have stories like this. And I think it was great that it was included in the aspect of the story. It was creepy. It was very atmospheric. If you like middle grade, or if you know someone who is into middle grade books and they are looking for a spooky story that's not going to keep them up at night, Small Spaces is definitely one I would recommend. Next up, we have What Lives in the Woods by Lindsay Currie. Also a middle grade spooky story. This one follows Ginny. She is an aspiring writer obsessed with Agatha Christie, and she has to spend her summer vacation in this old decrepit mansion in the woods, and spooky things happen. Very similar to Small Spaces, very similar atmosphere. I did like this one just a little bit more than Small Spaces, but still a 3.75. They're very similar. I do recommend both of them. This one was great to read in July because it takes place during a summer vacation, so I really felt that. And there were times where it was spooky and I was excited to see where the story went. So after I finished What Lives in the Woods, I was actually recommended another middle grade book by Lindsay Currie called The Girl in White. I enjoyed What Lives in the Woods so much that I thought, why not? Let's go ahead and read this next one. This book takes place in October on the East Coast in Massachusetts, and it is the perfect Halloween spooky vibes. The main character's name is Mallory. This town in Massachusetts is so obsessed with Halloween and their local legend of Sweet Molly, who was a young woman who lost her brother at sea. And essentially, spooky things start happening, and Mallory and her friends need to start investigating the story behind Sweet Molly and all of the scary things that are starting to go on. I did like this one more than What Lives in the Woods. I thought this one was really spooky. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the setting. I thought this was perfect for Halloween. And I really liked the kind of ghost story that was going on in this one. Sometimes I really like just a very straightforward kind of haunting ghost story. And this one was basically just a spooky ghost story in a really cool location. And I loved it. Did I mention I gave this one 4 stars? 4 stars for The Girl in White. Next up, we have The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This was the book that I was actually most anxious about. I thought this one was going to super traumatize me, but luckily it didn't. This is the story of Emma. She's taking care of a beach house, and she read a horror novel and hated it so much that she left a 1-star review on Amazon. Well, the author of this book then contacted her, asking her to please take down her review, and when she didn't, all hell breaks loose, basically. I loved this book. I gave this one 4 stars. It was wonderful. I finished this book in about 2 days. I did this as a buddy read. The buddy I read it with also loved it. This book had me sobbing. And I kind of essentially, I think, guessed the end of the book, but all of the twists and turns and everything that happened along the way, I did not expect. So it was thrilling. I loved it. I thought it was so good, and I will probably read more Taylor Adams in the future. Next, we have the Folcroft Ghosts. Not goats. By Darcy Coates. This is another middle grade story. This follows Tara and her brother Kyle, and their mother was in an accident and is in the hospital, and they have to go live with their estranged grandparents who they've never met. And then creepy things start happening around the house, and they start experiencing some pretty creepy behavior by their grandparents as well. I thought this book was fantastic. Again, it is a middle grade, so don't go into it expecting anything too terribly spooky, but I thought the atmosphere was very creepy. I thought the ghost aspect of this was very, very unnerving. And once you get into the history of their grandparents, it's kind of like, ooh, yikes. The atmosphere, the writing, the suspense, everything was working for this one. Definitely pick this one up if you're looking into getting into Darcy Coates and you do like a nice middle grade but spooky story. Then we have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I gave this book 4.25 stars. Now, I did listen to the audiobook of this one, and it was actually a full cast recording, and it was fantastic. This is essentially the story of nobody or Bod. In the very opening of his book, something very traumatizing and tragic happens to his family. Bod, who's about a year old, escapes to the graveyard next door and is then raised by the inhabitants of the graveyard. This book was so wonderful. I loved it. I do feel like it got a little slow at parts, so that is the reason it was a 4.25. But Neil Gaiman is a brilliant writer. I feel like this story was so interesting, and it's a modern classic for sure. We're getting into the final two. Bunnicula, the graphic novel. This is by James Howe and Andrew Donkin, illustrated by Stephen Gilpin. I talked about this in my BookTube newbie tag. Bunnicula, the novel, was probably the book that got me into reading big time as a kid. I loved Bunnicula so much. So I picked this one up from Barnes & Noble in July because I wanted to read the graphic novel version. And you guys, I had so much fun with this. It was 5 stars for me. I think a lot of that had to do with the nostalgia of reading Bunnicula again, but you add on to it the wonderful illustrations. I know the illustration style is not for everybody, but I thought it was fantastic. I loved revisiting all of these characters again. I loved Chester the cat so much as a kid, and I still love Chester. He sits and reads Edgar Allan Poe at night. Who doesn't want a cat that reads Edgar Allan Poe? What can I say? It's Bunnicula. It's a graphic novel version. It was one of my all-time favorite childhood novels, and I had a blast reading this one. And lastly, we have my favorite book that I read in July. Oh boy, get out the cryometer for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's been a long time since I've read this one. I read this one in high school and I remember really enjoying it. I am so glad I reread this one. Here's the thing. This book was written in 1818 and it's a lot. It is challenging in ways to kind of get through. So I did read this one in tandem with the audiobook from Audible with Dan Stevens as the narrator, and goodness gracious, Dan Stevens' Frankenstein is probably my favorite audiobook I have ever listened to. He did such a fantastic job. I'm not joking. If you are interested in reading Frankenstein, definitely listen to the Audible audiobook with Dan Stevens as the narrator. You will not be disappointed. His performance is chilling, it's heartbreaking, and it was really nice to actually read the book and listen to the audiobook together. It really helped me to understand a lot more of the themes and everything that goes into this absolute classic story. This is the story of Victor Frankenstein. He is obsessed with the idea of reanimating dead matter, and he creates a monster. I could go on and on about this one. Who is the monster? Who is the man? Frankenstein creating the monster in his image, the obsession that Frankenstein has with his science, the obsession that the monster has with his companionship, everything that happens in the DeLacy cottage with the monster just had me so gripped and heartbroken, but terrified at the same time. Oh, this is just so many feelings about this story. I loved it so much. I'm like getting teary-eyed thinking about it. But now that we have gone through all of the books that I've read, let's go ahead and quickly go through all of the projects that I made. Now, my goal was to make some Halloween, Summerween themed artwork as well, but unfortunately, I just didn't have time to get any artwork done this month, but that is my main focus for August, so the artwork is coming. But in July, I actually had quite a few commissions that I was working on, and so those took up the first half of the month. So by the time I was done with my commissions, it was already like the 15th of July, so I didn't have too much time to make a lot of things, but I did make a couple of things. Now, my little planner board that I like to keep track of all of the projects that I make every month says that I did complete this little ghost in July. I thought this was an August project, but it's just a little cute little quick Ghostie. This is a free pattern by Rose and Lily Amigurumi. I'll leave the link to their blog down below in case you want to make your own. This takes like 20 to 30 minutes to make. It's using some really fluffy, cute cotton, and it's just cute, really cute, quick little ghostie. Now, I also did make Jane Austen. She is a doll from the Crochet Iconic Women book that I talked about in my favorite amigurumi books that I have. And every week, my daughter and I go to our public library where we go to story time, and the children's librarian is just so wonderful. And we wanted to show our appreciation of what she does, and so I made her a little Jane Austen doll. Jane Austen is her favorite author, and so I thought this is a great way to show our appreciation of all she does for our community and the public library. Isn't she just so cute? I also did make this cute little tombstone. Look at his little grumpy face. Oh my goodness. So this is actually from volume 3 of 100 Amigurumi minis from A Menagerie of Stitches. You guys know I love Lauren Espy's patterns so much, and I love making the miniatures. Isn't it just so fun? Super quick. I made this one on stream. I did use HTV for the little rip sign, but you could always embroider that as well, and it would still be just as stinking cute. Love him. Now, you guys do know I like to pair my books that I'm reading with projects that I'm making, and after I read Small Spaces, I decided to make this little fella here. In the book Small Spaces, there are spooky scarecrows, and although he is a pumpkin, he kind of had that feel to him. This is the pattern Pumpkin Man by Monstrodom. And yeah, like I said, I saw this pattern in my collection, and I thought, you know what? He kind of fits the idea of Small Spaces in a way, even though he's not technically a scarecrow. So I did make him. Isn't he just so fun? Look at his little smile. A lot of people are already interested in bringing him home, so we'll see. Hopefully he finds a good home soon. And yeah, he was really fun to make. The next project that I made is this little fluffy vampire bat. This pattern was designed by Natalia Rodina. This was my first time painting safety eyes, and I think I did a pretty okay job. He also has cute little polymer clay features like his little nose and his fangs there, and he was crocheted with a blend of acrylic and wool yarn, so he is very fluffy and fuzzy. He did turn out a little bigger than I thought he was going to, but that's okay. I still think it's adorable. Just look at that little face. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you can get any cuter than that. Then I made this cute little felt Oogie Boogie. So I have been wanting to do felt creatures and little felt ornaments and things for a while now, and I finally decided to get some patterns. This pattern is from SokolFelt on Instagram, and I love Oogie Boogie. Oogie Boogie is my favorite Disney villain. Oogie Boogie is just everything. I even have my little Oogie Boogie ears up here in celebration of my little Oogie Boogie. I decided to test out my very first handmade felt cutie with Oogie Boogie, and I think he turned out great. I did add this little kind of tag here so he could be an ornament. He just turned out fun, and he's really cute, really simple. It came with the SVG files, so I was able to cut them out on my Cricut using some felt from Amazon, and it was so easy to cut them out and then just sew them together. It was so fun. I can't wait to make more of these. So the last one that I made was actually the little Frankenstein's monster. Now, I had just finished the book when I decided to make him, and in the book, he is described to have more like yellow-like skin, but I decided to give him more of like a fluorescent yellow. This one is designed to be closer to the Hollywood monster, but I still thought it was cute to make him. I am going to keep this one because I don't know, I just love him. Look at him. Isn't he so cute? He's just so fun. Again, cut out all of the pieces on my Cricut and then sewed them together. And that was all of the completed projects that I made, although I am currently working on my very first crop top. This is the Witchy Top by Bloody Mary Art, and I've never made a crop top before. I'm a little anxious about crop tops. This is definitely not something I will be wearing in public, but I wanted to try my hand at a crochet crop top. So we are in the middle of that, and hopefully I get that done soon. This will be obviously for me, but I did just want to share my progress on that one. And yeah, that's in the works. But that's all for me. That was my wrap up for the month of July. All of the books that I read, all of the projects that I made. Did you read any of the books that I read in July? And if so, what did you think of them? What are you currently making? Please let me know down in the comments. That is all for me today. I love you so much. You are so wonderful. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will see you all a little later. Bye.